Altered Beast is often considered one of the signature games of the Sega Genesis. For many, this game was considered classic because for a certain period of time, it was actually packaged with the Genesis. So for many, this was the first Genesis or Mega Drive game they played. From what I understand, this is actually a very accurate port of the arcade original game, though apparently it's a little bit slower. Now, I'm not playing this off a Genesis, and I'm not playing this off the Virtual Console. I am playing this off of the Sega Genesis collection that I got on Steam. As such, I am playing this on a PS3 controller. I'll establish now, the PS3 controller is not gonna be any bit of a problem, because I never really had an issue with it. I tested the DualShock 3 with multiple games on the Sega Genesis collection, and I never really experienced any problems. So just before going in, the PS3 controller is in no way a hindrance to me playing this game. So I'm not going to be over-judgmental on controls. Altered Beast is a 2D beat-em-up. The screen scrolls right, you try to keep up with it, and you punch and kick everything in your way that's trying to hit you. To end these stages, you have to collect 3 orbs. Each of them power you up a little bit until you reach some super form, whether that be a wolf man, a bear, or whatever. Once you reach that point, it's then that you can fight the final boss and end the stage, and then move on. To get through these stages, you punch, you kick, and that's about it. There's really not much strategy when it comes to attacking things, because there are no combos and no real combinations you can use. Enemies don't particularly have complicated AI either, so really all you can do is just spam the punch and kick button until they're dead. Because this game doesn't really have much depth, it really loses any replayability and it just runs its course within a few minutes. Most of the ending animals are also uninteresting. I mean, there's a couple of times when I felt that the animal form was a really good reward, but that's really just about one form. Most of the other ones just are kind of weak. In spite of the lack of strategy or depth, this game is actually pretty hard. There's a couple of reasons for this. For one thing, you don't heal at all in between stages. Any damage you take with you for the rest of the game. The game also kind of expects you to learn certain attacks that aren't completely necessary. For example, if you hold down and kick, you kick straight up, which is probably the most unintuitive way to do so. Also, holding up and jump makes you do a super jump, which really makes me wonder why this combination needed to be here at all. I actually only found it by accident, and before that I ended up getting hit with a lot of cheap enemies. Even if you know the few unexplanatory attacks, you're still probably going to be really frustrated by this game. A lot of times the platforming elements that they try to incorporate are just annoying. And a lot of the enemy placements in this game are just horrendously cheap. And remember, I can't exactly say, oh, I just gotta last until this point, then I'll get all my health back. No, if an enemy gets a cheap hit on me, that stays with me until I game over. This game also progresses very, very slowly. Since completion is based on attaining the orbs, all you're doing is just waiting for a blue animal to come out so you can get it. Everything else is just filler up to that point. There's also almost no variety. Yeah, there are a couple of changes with the enemy, but your strategy is basically the same for most of them. Just punch and kick. Because this game is so insubstantial in how much it actually has, it kind of runs its course at about 5 minutes. I mean, you won't beat the game in that long, but this isn't the sort of game you'd want to beat because it's just annoying. There are just too many cheap enemies. The ending bosses are mostly cheap, except for the first one. He's cool. And there's simply not too much to this game at all. This game is minorly entertaining for about 5 minutes, and there are a couple of interesting moments. But for both myself and general audiences, Altered Beast gets about 3. There's not much very specific to my own tastes, and I think a lot of you guys would end up having the same experience that I did. So in spite of the fact that this game is pretty damn weak, why is it still so well remembered? Well, I think it's because back in the Nintendo versus Sega days, if you wanted to show what the Genesis could technically do on a graphical level, Altered Beast was a great example of this. Because it actually does have a very good look to it. It's much more detailed than most other NES games. And even though the sound is kind of muffled and a bit primitive, it was very novel at the time to hear the voices that are in the game.
Rise from your grave.
Now we're in a time when we can just look back at these games and see what really holds up and what doesn't. And to be honest, Altered Beast simply does not hold up.